This is an encore re-release. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the show.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Warning. The Wicked Library contains adult themes, adult situations, adult language, and graphic depictions of terror, bloodshed, the occasional possession, and your future trips to your psychiatrist, so he or she can assure you it's only a story. This podcast is intended for mature audiences only. You've been warned, kiddies. Hello, kiddies. Have a seat and relax. I am your librarian. There's nothing to be afraid of, yet. Hold on to yourselves, boils and ghouls. This is going to be a dark ride. We'll leave the lights on for now. No talking. It's story time at the Wicked Library.
The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
So in, I can't remember what month it was. In 2015, it was my publisher at the time. They published a graphic novel of mine. It's a huge war story called the Djinn Jihad. And, we talk a lot about Islam on the show. And I did a ton of research while I was writing. And then recently, we did an episode, the one and only episode. I'm like scratching my head, like, how did this happen in 3 years? This bread and butter subject that I have, I never even touched on it. Well, we recently did an episode about the Djinn, and my book came up in the episode. I was talking to Brian Barat, and my book came up on the episode. And so for our third birthday celebration, Abracastapalooza, I thought I would put this on. So back when this book got released, one of these podcasts, a couple episodes ago, I was like, all the podcasts that I helped invent would never exist. Well, one of those podcasts that I did help create was a podcast called The Wicked Library. And the Wicked Library focused on like upcoming and unknown authors. And they would do basically like audio. I don't know if drama is the right word. They do audio versions. It's like a book. It's like an audio book of these horror stories. They're horror, speculative fiction stories. And they would do like interviews with the authors at the end, and it was fun. It was fun to be involved in, and it grew into this whole thing. It grew into its whole other thing, and then it started doing like spin-offs and like crossover podcasts. This whole unexplored area of, you know, fictional like stories and short story forms on podcast, and it was awesome. And because I knew the guys that were running it, we had come up with the idea for me to take a chapter of this graphic novel that I did, the Djinn Jihad, and write a prose version of it. And I never written I had never written prose at all. You know, nowadays I have a prose project that has been published, but it's not like my passion. But the first prose thing that I ever did that got published was this story. I adapted chapter 3 of my graphic novel into prose, and Nelson W. Pyles read it. He did the reading, and another friend of mine, Dan Foytik, did some of the sound design. Actually, I think Nelson did some of the sound design too, and then Dan I don't know how it worked. Dan remastered it or something. I don't know. But so, anyhow, my first serious prose work, and when I listen to it, I still fucking get a charge out of it. You know, I'm not, there's things that I would change for sure. Probably a lot of things that I would change for sure, but being my first prose project, I thought it was really good, and it's not in print anywhere. Like the prose version, like you can't find it anywhere else. So I thought it'd be fun to, you know, while we're hot on the trail of this other Djinn episode, and also like just celebrating the show being around for 3 years, I thought I'd post this. So if you're looking for, you know, an occult aspect or story or whatever the show normally deals, that's why this is like a bonus episode. Unfortunately, you're not going to find it here, but you're going to find a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the Djinn episode in theory and practice, in history and appreciation, jammed into this story. So the story itself, I think, is only like 20 or so minutes in, and then it's supposed to be a short interview, but it switches to a long interview. And I remember we had to do it on my phone, so the audio is dodgy. So if you don't want to listen to the audio, if you don't want to listen to the interview, that's fine. If you don't want to listen to the story, that's fine. I'll post something else in a day or two. But I wanted to share this with you guys because I love it. I love these characters, and I love the topic, and I love this book. I fucking love this book. Yeah, so that's it. I just wanted to share it, and I hope you guys like it, and, you know, let me know what you think about it. Towers, over and out.
The Djinn Jihad, Chapter 3.
Smoke billows up from the city streets like it is trying to escape from the madness that is festering below. Pittsburgh looks like a ghost town from far away. None of the button-down professionals braved the commute today. A few of the blue-collar types made it in, the ones that didn't have any sick days left. And of course, the security guards made it in. They always made it in. Since the mosque on the north side was bombed, the city had been holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Behind a broken window in a storefront there is a television turned to a local news broadcast. Somewhere behind the fierce screams and angry chanting, the blonde talking head is calmly telling us all about the peaceful demonstration around the newly built Freedom City Center skyscraper. She calmly raises her eyebrow and says any violence must be the fault of the city's police force. Her TV studio is in a building with armed guards on the other side of town. The caliphate rises! The phrase is screamed and pulses through the mob like a tidal wave. Teeth clenched, spit and raised fists. A wild pack of dogs scrapping for blood, cartilage, meat, bone. Ski masks, burning flags, AK-47s. The Shadow Caliphate rises! A glass bottle sails overhead. It is filled with searing pain, and it is on fire. The bottle smashes against the Freedom City Center. Flames coat the wall. The glass on the doors to the lobby are broken. The doors themselves have been locked for all the good that is going to do in a few minutes. There are cops in the lobby, and they are panicking. One is on his walkie-talkie pleading for help. "What are rubber bullets going to do? They have machine guns out there." Another one says, his eyes wide, "He has a suicide vest." Away from the mob, a man with an explosive vest and a black mask breaks free from the other protesters. He walks towards the door, the terrified police officers. The man in the ski mask is quietly saying prayers. The one on the radio yelled, "Jesus, I don't know what to do!" Far above, on a window washer scaffold on a building across the street, hunkered Gretchen Cooper. 50 cal sniper rifle, binoculars, and a radio. She is holding the binoculars up to her pointed cat-framed glasses, her striking green eyes scanning, surveying. It had taken her a little longer to get into a position than she planned for, but the rest of the team should be in place. They went in through the parking garage on the opposite side of the building. She keys the mic. "Even is out here with me in the truck, in case these riders go full-on war zone. SWAT team at the front doors. We'll use them as the first line of defense. They look spooked already. The crowd has AKs. I see a few RPGs. No lamp yet." Inside the building in the lobby, the boys are listening to Gretchen through earpiece radios. Shin is behind the cops, out of sight, out of mind. Shinpo Tan is behind the column, peering out. He looks like a ninja, mask, suit, swords, and an AR-15. Stitch is the third line of defense. Stitch is further back, weapon in hand and full-on tactical vest, and underneath that, his trademark filthy white bodysuit he is sewn into. Axe and McCord are in the main elevator lobby. They are the last line of defense. Staff Sergeant McCord, the World War II-era warbot, yellow eyes flashing, responds, "We all know our jobs. Let's get control over this thing before it gets started." Axe peers off, looking at the lane of approach. When this thing goes down, he must not let McCord get too far away from him. The boys hear the mic open again and Gretchen's voice. There is movement. The protester with the bomb vest is sprinting for the door. Broken glass, scared cops. Gretchen is trying to shoulder the sniper rifle, but the bomber is moving very fast. The explosion is blinding. It opens up the whole front entrance of the building like a gaping wound. Through the smoke, Gretchen can see 3 more bombers running in right after. One of them disappears into the building. You couldn't even hear the cracks of the sniper rifle over the mob. The top of the 3rd bomber's skull disappears, splintering skull, atomizing brain jelly. The 4th bomber's head briefly turned into a cloud of pink mist and disappears. Shin sees the bomber running toward the main elevator lobby, the center of the main part of the building. He has a giant scimitar drawn and raised over his head. Gretchen keys her mic. "One is heading your way. You might not want to use your rifle. He's wired with C4. Shin ditches his assault rifle and draws his katana. The bomber sees Shin and yells his last words. "The Caliphate rises!" A large white box truck is parked in an alley across from the protest. Sitting patiently inside the truck is Even, the stone golem. Rabbi Aronofsky was ducked down, hiding. Gretchen tells him to open the door and invite his friend to the party. "This is all escalating rather quickly," the rabbi says to himself as he gets out and nervously walks to the rear of the truck. "I didn't know it was going to be like this," he says as he grasps the handle of the truck. As the door swings open, the rabbi takes a deep breath and tilts his head up to look at his work. He allows himself to feel a little swell of pride. He says, almost as a prayer, "Yasher Koch, Even the stone golem. Give him hell, son." At the edge of the protest, jihadists are screaming. The caliphate rises. The box truck is now wide open. The heavy-duty shocks on the back axle creaks and moans with relief. Even the stone golem stands. a monolithic slab of granite easily 10 feet tall with 4 Hebrew letters carved into his chest. He is a monument crafted to honor the ancient god of war, the god of the Old Testament, blood and thunder. Even the stone golem is here to honor that god and do his work. With impossibly heavy concrete cracking steps, he moves forward towards the mob. When the wild mad dog protesters see the stone golem, it is already too late for them. The golem rampages through their midst, arms and legs torn from sockets and joints sailing in the air. Jihadists folded in half violently. Blood, teeth, vomit. A swing of the mighty stone arm pulping people. Torn off heads fly through the air and roll onto the street. The ancient gray stone glistens with the blood of the enemy. One of them fires an RPG at the golem. The grenadier says to the man standing next to him, "Go, brother, you must deliver the lamp." The man beside him has an old brass lamp strapped to him. He says, "For the Caliph," and starts running away from the golem. He starts running for the smoking, gaping entrance to the doomed building. He is followed by another bomber. With the briefest flicker of chrome and blood, Shin's katana effortlessly pushes through a bomber's chest, slides deftly between his ribs, through his heart, and past between 2 of his vertebrae. A third of the sword was sticking out of his back, and with a flick of his wrist, the blade turns him off like a light switch. The runner with the lamp and the suicide bomber who is running behind him approaches Shin. The runner jumps in the air and steps on the tip of Shin's sword. The runner springboards off the weapon and flips over Shin. Shin pivots around to have at the runner. He widens his stance and goes in high guard setting, ready to end this madness before it gets too far out of control. The bomber who is trailing behind the runner yells, "For the Shadow Caliphate!" As the bomber triggers his bomb, he yells, "The Caliphate rises!" It's blinding and loud. The vest packed with nails and rat poison. The nails to provide shrapnel, the rat poison to act as an anticoagulant. The runner takes cover and Shin takes the full brunt of the explosion. Did I mention how bright and loud it is? Through the smoke of the explosion, Stitch sees the runner. He brings up his rifle. Buzzing in his ear, he can hear Gretchen telling Shin to get out of the building. "This is gonna be so titties," he says to himself. Gretchen hardly ever lets him use guns. Before he pulls the trigger, he starts screaming, "Rat-a-tat-tat! Rat-a-tat-tat!" He squeezes the trigger. Bolt clacks, brass flies, bullets burst out. The runner, Stitch notices, is very fast and agile. He jumps up and kicks off the wall, literally dodging bullets like one of those French guys. "Pew, pew, pew!" Stitch yells, still blasting away at the runner. The runner spin kicks Stitch and rings his bell pretty good. He loses his rifle and he finds himself on his back, looking up at the runner who stands over him. The runner looks into Stitch's ice blue eyes. He says to Stitch in a low, serious tone, intensity flowing through him, hatred pulsing off of him, or maybe from within him. A beacon of everything terrifying, willful hatred. "The Caliphate rises!" "Raise this, jerkface!" While Stitch raised his right leg as fast and hard as he could into the crotch of the running jihadist, he raises his right hand and flips him the most serious middle finger ever flipped in recorded history. Bam! Stitch actually feels something break, or pop, or burst open on the business end of his combat boot, which is totally gross. McCord and Axe show up to lend support. They see the runner obviously in serious pain. He has the lamp in his hand. Axe points his rifle. "Get him, Sergeant!" McCord cautions against firing since the nature of the lamp was unknown to him. There was no debate, no shots fired. It all happened so fast. The runner yells one last time, gasping through the intense pain that feels like it is running down his leg like hot butter. "The Caliphate rises!" Blue light exploded forth from the lamp as it opened. Something weird was happening with the air pressure. The sound of a high-speed train wreck was somehow coming from that little brass lamp. Gretchen could swear that the whole building buckled a little. Shin runs out of the gaping wound entrance of the building. He asks over the radio what was going on. Inside, McCord grabbed Stitch. "Come on, sport." "This is gonna suck," Stitch said. A bright blue and orange flash shot from the ground floor up into the highest floor of the building. Gretchen could see it flashing up floor to floor, shattering a fault line of exterior glass all the way up the building. The building seemed to take a breath and then groan. The next explosion ripped through the building along the fault line and seemed to separate the doomed Freedom City Center. Another explosive surge cracking the building in half. It was almost like a punishment for somehow still standing. With that, the building started coming down on itself. One last victorious surge lighting up the sky with hatred. Gretchen could feel the heat and debris. She was speechless other than the words, prayer, whatever. Oh my God. Jihadists started to scatter as smoke and debris spewed forth. One runs past even the stone golem, yelling, "It is done! The walking fire is among us!" That guy looks really happy. Shin is hunched down, peering at the building coming down, trying to conceive how Axe, Stitch, and McCord could possibly live through this. "I can't see anything down here." He tries his radio. "Axe! McCord!" Deep in the center of the collapsing building is a chaotic avalanche hell. Masonry, steel, broken glass, gravity. Axe and Stitch are standing next to McCord, who is shouldering a massive amount of falling wreckage. The warbot is using fallen I-beams to leverage and distribute the weight of the crumbling building on his shoulders. Axe and Stitch are crouched under him. The rabbi is weeping, watching the building as it and its pieces finally comes to a rest. There is no way anyone could have survived that. From his vantage point, he can see a blinding blue and orange light making its way out of the ruins of the building. The brilliant light casting long shadows of Shin and even the stone golem over the wreckage as they stand to meet the Djinn. The dirt and tears making muddy trails on the rabbi's face. Monsters. They're monsters. Dear God. Frantic, Gretchen keys her mic. "Shin, are you okay?" Shin answers her. "It's up to us now." Debris, smoke, lunatic screams. Gretchen fires back. "Us and even the stone golem." "I am going in there to save the team," Shin admits. He looks at the ruins of the building. The new church of hatred. The altar of chaos. Gretchen protests for some reason. Shin interrupts. "They could still be alive." Half question, half prayer. Saria, the Djinn, emerges from the ruins of the building. A full 9 feet tall with blue skin. The walking rage. The walking hatred. The walking fire. He is mostly bald, a ponytail lock of flames at the back of his head, his blue and orange flaming eyes. He wears the brass wrist bracers of a slave. He raises his arms to the sky.
It is Allah's will that I once again war on the soil of my enemy.
His words echo through the surreal stillness. Death, destruction, wreckage. Somewhere in the chaos, a group of police officers are trying to make it to the building. One of them is run through with a scimitar. "Riders!" one of the cops yelled. "The caliphate rises!" Surges, jump-starting the madness. Running forms through clouds and smoke. The leader of the police officers shoulders his shotgun. "This isn't a riot, it's a war zone!" He uses the shotgun to open up any person not wearing a police uniform. Another cop sees the wreckage of the building through the smoke. It looks like a strange abandoned cathedral or something out of an old black and white picture of some distant world war. He pulls his radio. Freedom City Center is down! The whole damn thing is down! Another cop starts barking orders. Set up a perimeter! We must surround this chaos! Rises! Thank Allah! The caliphate rises! Yelling, half fear, half elation, half running away, half dances. Crazy asses. Another cop on his walkie-talkie trying to be the lone voice of reason. We have to get out of here! The Djinn steps out into the street, out into the chaos. The sunlight struggles against the smoke and violence, muscles rippling under its pale blue skin. The Djinn smiles wide, his appetite wet for the carnage he will bring. Death, war, jihad. Across the street, even the stone golem approaches him, spattered in the blood of his enemies. Through the dark, billowing smoke, the police officers see the two massive figures approaching each other. Jesus Christ, what are those? One yelps. Both of the blotted-out dark figures cock their arms back, both about to throw a punch. We gotta get out of here, another one adds. The Djinn and the golem's hands connect with massive force. Cracks splinter through even the stone golem's hand and up the great granite forearm. His fist starts to crumble, falling to the pavement.
I will return you to the sand, Golem,
the Djinn declares triumphantly. Across the street, Shin scrambles up on the wreckage of the building. He is lifting large slabs of broken and damaged rubble over his head as he calls out for his buried team. He scans around looking for any sign of life. Axe! McCord! The Djinn and the golem are grappling now. Stone cracking, splintering like slate. Neck, choke, squeeze. The Djinn elbows his way out of a chokehold. A splintering star of damage erupts across the golem's chest. With a punch from the mighty Djinn, the left part of the golem's head atomizes to gravel. The Djinn hammers the golem's chest. Knuckle craters across the massive stone frame. With one last final blow, the golem crumbles to rubble. The Djinn stares into the smoke and addresses the world.
You send this hero magic to defeat me instead of meeting me head on. The way of the desert.
Holding his arms up triumphantly in the air, Saraya, the Djinn, screams to his enemies,
I will teach you the ways of the desert. I will teach you with my hands.
Shouldering the weight of the world, Gretchen's still up in her perch, watching the fierce warrior fall to the Djinn. She keys her mic and, trying to hide the surrender in her voice, asks, how do we stop him? He's unstoppable.
Learn more at theabracast.com. Get graphic elements, notes, worksheets, and text versions of selected episodes, as well as access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing into the mailing list. Get all that, plus exclusive episodes, by supporting the show and becoming a subscriber at subscribestar.com.
Today I have John Towers, and we just finished reading his, well, actually Nelson just finished reading, because this is an encore performance of the Djinn Jihad. Nelson and I decided we were going to take a few weeks to work on some other stuff and catch up on some projects and get ready for the Halloween special. And we never like to just go dead, so we always like to do like a best of type of thing. Mm-hmm. And that was the part that was hard for me, because when I looked at the prior seasons, to me, really all of the episodes are best ofs. So the reason I picked yours is because not only is it a great story, but it was interesting to me because it's a prose adaptation of a graphic novel. And usually, if I'm not mistaken, things go the other way, right?
Right, yeah.
So what was it like to take the story that you created really for a visual medium and convert it into a written word?
It was actually stressful. It was kind of one of the hardest things I've ever done because I'm not really known for my words writing. And this is like my first like crack at doing it, really well. And Nelson had already told me, that he would put the story on if I wrote it. So I felt like a lot of pressure because, the Wicked Library is one of my favorite podcasts, and I didn't want to like lump some, bullshit together and just have Nelson feel like he's obligated to put it on. So, I really took a lot of time with it and, had a few people read it over. And, like to me, doing the words thing because like I surround myself with writers and creative people, and like I was the only dude that's never been published, with prose work. So I was like, oh man, this is like, I just felt like a lot of like pressure from myself, just to turn out some good work,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and full disclosure, I mean, Nelson often refers to you as the creator emeritus of the Wicked Library. So you have an in with the show anyway. And I appreciate what you're saying because I mean, that people knowing that you have an in with the show, it's kind of like I have to deliver even twice as good as the guy before me.
Yeah. Like, it's hard to like quantify art or like stories like that, but certainly like, because the one little rule that I did break is I had it kind of set up beforehand. So, like, I didn't have to do the submission process like everybody else does,
Right.
So I was already kind of like, I was already kind of like putting myself out there. So I was like, certainly, like, I wanted to do, like, I just wanted to have, like, the best story that I could possibly do,
Yeah.
Based off of it's basically the third chapter of the graphic novel. Yeah.
Right.
So I picked that chapter. That's the one that I wanted to do because it's got like most of the characters and stuff in it. And, we get to like get a little POV from each of the good guys. And, it's got the main bad guy is kind of like revealed there at the end. And, so I just targeted that one, and I was just like, I'm going to write the shit out of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, you did a great job. It has everything that a great short story should. I mean, with a good short story, it's not like a novel or even a graphic novel where you have the time to kind of build up to the characters and to build your universe and to get everybody on board. You pretty much have to drop right into the action and have something exciting and interesting and scary going on, and I think you did that really well.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I mean, Nelson did such a great job with reading it and stuff, and I knew he would, so like, again, I was just like, my first kind of foray into like, worthy writing, I was like, I just felt like I had to kind of pull the stops out on it. And one of the ways that I did that is I did the present tense, which was really difficult for me to write in. Like, it was super hard for me to do that.
And I'll tell you, that's one of the other things that drew me to the story because it's not a common way to write, and it is very, very difficult to write that way. And I think you did a really cool job with it.
Yeah, like at first I was just like, I'll just do it this way. Like, how difficult can it be? And I'm like rereading it like 100 times, and I just keep finding past tenses in there. I'm like driving myself crazy for it. But I feel like when you do write in that tense, it's like it helps put you like in a real good observer position. Like you're kind of in the middle of it. Because it's not, you don't have that, it's not past. So like, psychologically, I feel like it puts you like right there with the characters and the events that are unfolding.
Yep. It's definitely a very, it's a faster moving, it's more immediate. But again, it is very difficult because almost everything we're exposed to is past tense. So, I mean, I know you're a big reader. And, that's kind of what we become used to as readers. And therefore what we become used to as writers is everything occurring in the past tense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if it's like I don't know if it's like an advertising trick or like an Edward Bernays kind of thing, but it just seemed like that little tweak really affected the way that the story was to me. You know, like I had written it in past tense, as well. Mm-hmm. And that's where I kind of shifted fire and was like, no, I'm going to put him right in the middle of this. So yeah, but definitely the hardest part was that. That wasn't the hardest part. But there's also some challenges too, because when you're working with the comic now, like I write and I illustrate the comic book. So usually I don't have to describe the things that are around the action, right, because I already control that, Yeah. So it's like the biggest departure I think is I did the monologue for the internal monologue for Stitch, like where he gets the gun and he's like titties, like that's not in the book, like that's just what he was thinking to himself. So I had to kind of think about that stuff because like his character was not well represented until I wrote that, Right. So
when you're writing your comics, I mean, do you write the story and the dialogue at the same time, or do you draw first, like storyboard? Or how do you usually go?
No, like I'm like tyrannically obsessive. Like I like outline, thumbnail, script, draft, rewrites. So I definitely do all the writing and stuff first. And the main reason is because, like, with comics, like, when you're dealing with word writing, like, that's what it is. It's not a page count. It's how many words you got in something, right?
Right.
But in comics, it's about the page count, because you have to figure out how much real estate you have to figure out the best way to tell, your story with the pages that you have. So I commonly refer to it as real estate. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody or not, and then you have to like look, how many panels are going to be on the page? How do you arrange them? And with the graphic novel, like limited myself in that because every page of the graphic novel is a representation of the golden ratio. Like I did this mind trick with it. So I had like that limitation, where I can only do like set up so much of a joke or an action piece, before I get run into the big panel where I have to pay it off,
Right.
But so that was cool getting to explore, not having to do that, when I'm actually writing the story. So.
And now you've actually written some additional prose, right?
Yeah, I mean, with the story that Nelson read, I went ahead and I got published in the Dreadful Geographic. I believe it's coming out this month or next month. At Forsaken.
Okay.
It's a brand new publishing company. So yeah, like that came right out of Nelson reading that story on the Wicked Library. So it was really cool.
That's really cool. It's always nice to hear that, a writer gets an opportunity from the show because, I mean, as you know, that's kind of the whole design and the guts of it is that, we're here to promote the authors and the artists and to get people opportunities. So it's nice to hear that actually happened for you. Yeah, man. And it actually happened pretty fast. Like I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you even know, but I believe the story was like in the middle of last season was when that episode originally aired. And, it was only out there for like maybe a month or whatever, where Nelson was like, hey, I have someone who wants to talk to you about writing a short story for this book. So, that was awesome. And it's Maddie Von Stark, she's no stranger to your show for sure. Right. She was the art director for, I think, 3 or 4 of the seasons of the show. And yeah, she was pretty involved in doing the covers for pretty much all the shows up until the beginning of this season. She moved on to do some stuff with Book Trope, and obviously it created an opportunity for us to open up the doors and bring in some new artists and kind of get some new voices, so to speak, out there. But yeah, you were originally 504, the 4th episode of season 5. So. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, Maddie, she's been on my podcast before and a couple of times, and she just reached right out. The thing that you said about the opportunities and stuff with the podcast, it's really cool, and I feel like that opportunity that I had,
coming right from the show is like the perfect example of how like the show is designed and built. You get such a great reader, actor or whatever, like Nelson, saying words that you wrote is crazy. And then like a direct benefit, right, coming right from, that experience itself is awesome.
It's interesting because, there's not really a lot of other shows out there that kind of do what the Wicked Library does. And I think it's very unique in that way. And it creates a lot of opportunities for not only the authors, but, for the listeners as well to hear stuff in a way that they probably never would. Otherwise. Right.
And then like, when you took over, you expanded that same model out to artists. And it's like, it is so awesome to see, a different style of art like every week. And I know the care you take into like developing those relationships and figuring out which artist, would work best. I imagine that you put a ton of time into that.
Yeah.
So it could be someone like me who's been out there, rocking and rolling for, over, 10 years now, or it could be someone that no one's ever heard of before. And it's getting the same, like, whatever your listenership is, that same amount of eyes, on there. It's something that's so unique, like it's just so crazy. I'm happy to be a part of that side of it too.
Yeah. And that's one of the other things that's really cool is that, I got to use your art for your episode this time around. And, you've done art for the show 3 times this season, I think, as of the recording of this. So you did Stuck for Caitlin Marceau, you did Scalene Love Triangle for Carrie Lipp, and you did Train Man for Cindy Lohman. And now, of course, we got an encore performance of yours and your artwork on there. And people will recognize it instantly because they can go right over to Amazon.com and pick up a copy of the graphic novel with the same cover.
Yeah. And it's cool because like you just walked me through those little art projects, and it's like, it's funny because I did all of them, and I used the same process to do all of them, but they all look totally different, so it's like, it's cool to see like a repeat offender.
Yes. We definitely like that. Well, I wanted to ask you, whenever you're developing a panel, that's the correct term, right? A panel is one encapsulated scene.
Panel or frame, yeah, you can use either one.
Okay. So when you're working on that individual frame or that individual panel, how do you go about picking the image that's just the right moment? Because some panels cover a very short period of time, but if I'm not mistaken, some frames, there's events that occur and you're just picking one image to represent that sequence.
Well, sometimes there's rules, like the big comic book rule is when you're drawing like something like a punch. You never draw it connecting. You either draw like the wind up or the follow through. Like it's never like the vulgar display of power Pantera album cover where it's just knocking the guy's block off. Like you never see that in a comic book. Like it's always right before or right after. So there's that. Then there's also like, I do this occasionally, but guys like, Frank Miller does this really well, where he'll play with the depth of the gutter. Like he's dealing with the space in between the panels to kind of subliminally tell you that more time's passed between this frame and this frame. Or he'll shorten it up if less time, does that. He doesn't do that all the time, but, he's guilty of doing that. And I think that's like a really cool kind of idea.
Yeah.
As far as like what's happening on the actual frame, I kind of think about it as like a storyboard for a movie. Like you plot out like the important stuff, right? Or like if it's like a character moment, then you arrange your characters to where they can, you can see the emotion on face,
Right.
So there's a lot of different factors that go into that.
That's very interesting.
It's kind of like you got to think about it as like you're the writer, the casting director,
I'm familiar with that experience.
The guy that's in charge of running the camera, the guy, you're telling everyone where to stand and like what they're going to say. Yeah. But as far as dialogue and stuff is concerned, going back to a question that you asked me before, I take full advantage of every piece of my process to do editing. So like if I get there, like say I'm like 75% done with something and I look at it and I'm like, oh, well, I need to tweak this frame. Like, I'll draw that frame on a different piece of paper, and I'll scan it in and gimmick it up and then just paste it on top, like to fix the art, or like go into Photoshop and kind of, clean something up.
Mm-hmm.
Or, that goes even for like dialogue. Like if I'm like, oh no, like it'll be so much cooler if he did this or said this instead. Like I'll just change dialogue, like in any kind of part of my process. Like
right.
I take full editorial advantage of that, so I don't get like too locked in, to that. And like if you ever see like my original pages, like I'll pencil scribble notes to myself in, like, hey, when I scan this page or when I'm lettering this page, I'm going to want this guy to see this, or whatever. So it's like I'm always kind of managing my process as I'm going through it.
Yeah. No, that's, it's something I guess you have to be mindful of, because whenever you're doing dialogue for a comic, typically the dialogue appears in frame with the characters and can obscure part of your art. I mean, it's going to obscure part of your artwork. So you have to, to pick what it's going to show, what it's going to hide at that point.
Yeah.
I noticed that when I was working with Steve on a little side project that we did whenever I took over the Wicked Library, where we did kind of Victoria Meets the Librarian. It was a really fun experience, but that was one of the things that it broke my heart sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to obscure this, but it has to go here.
Yeah, you got to totally be mindful about that kind of stuff. And it's like, 13 years into this adventure for me, like I do it subconsciously most of the time.
Yeah.
Like I'll be like, oh, he's getting pretty wordy here. Like I gotta like let him chew up some background. Or in this one, like he's not saying anything, so I could go nuts.
Yeah.
With all the visual information. So and it's kind of different too, because like we talk often about like the difference between novels and short stories, mm-hmm. and that same stuff applies to comic books too. Like, when you're dealing with a graphic novel, it's basically like way more like different kind of storytelling than when you're working on like a comic book series. Mm-hmm. When you work on a comic book series, it becomes soap opera-ish, mm-hmm. like because it just keeps going and going and going. But with a graphic novel, like you need to have a beginning, middle, and end, So,
yeah.
There's all kinds of like stuff that you got to think about, and those are gears that I shift all the time, like depending on what I'm working on, because I do, comics and web comics and graphic. Now I do the whole 9 yards, yeah. And it's always like, well, am I going to need to bunch this up as a trade paperback at some point in time, or is this going to be, you always got to be mindful about that kind of stuff, I guess.
No, that's really cool. And I think that, that's one of the reasons why I like doing the interviews and sharing that with the listeners of the show, is because I think there's a lot that we can learn from the way that different writers do their work. And definitely, since you are working in a slightly different medium, I think that there's new ways of looking at things, like conceptualizing some of this stuff. I'm already having ideas for different ways that I could write prose.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like that's like the biggest lesson that I learned in college was process. And I remember when I figured it out, I was sitting in a typography class, and like for people that aren't like graphic designers or aren't like boners thinking about typography, like it could be possibly like, and there are dudes that are like that, by the way. Like people get real into type. Anyhow, like you're sitting there and you're like, okay, so I have thumbnails, and then I then I do a markup on like sketch paper and like do a couple of different versions of it, and then I gotta start working on my final, and then I gotta like do finishing touches and stuff. And it seems basic, right? Like, yeah, of course that's what you have to do, but like once you learn that process, you can apply it to anything. Like when I sit down to write, that's how I do it. A lot of people would call it like unpacking. Like I'll start with a sentence and be like, oh no, I gotta add on to that shit,
Yeah.
And you just kind of build, your message, whatever you're messaging.
That's really cool.
But the book was a ton of fun to do. Basically I set out to do I wanted to do like a big summer crossover event, but I wanted to be like have a real indie sensibility. And I don't know if anyone's ever done anything like that before. But I had a blast. I had a blast doing it, and thanks for you guys for listening and buying the book to people who have. So yeah, it's just a real fun thing, and I just kind of wanted to do something like totally different.
So before we run, Do you want to talk real quick about where people can find more about your process and how to draw comics the Stigmata way?
Oh yeah, like my little studio is called Stigmata Studios. You can find it online, stigmatastudios.com, and there's free comics up there. You can go read some free web comics if you guys don't feel like forking out clams. The podcast is there. You can check that out. And then under the video section, I have a video series. Basically, it's how to draw comics the Stigmata way. And the first season, basically, I filmed like every step of my process going through while I was actually working on the Jihad book. So if you guys want to like literally look at me while I'm doing what I'm just because I'm talking about, you can do that. The second season was all about me marketing the book. My publisher shifted from a March 2015 to a September 2014 date. So they kind of pulled the rug out from under me as far as like, getting all my shit together. So, if you want to see videos of me at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how to use Twitter, that's on there.
Well, and I want to point out with that too, that a lot of times, one of the things that I hear most commonly from writers is that they struggle with ways to use social media and connect with their fans in an effective way. And I will say that you have some really great ideas, tips, secrets, whatever you want to call them, throughout the series there. So if for those that are writers or aspiring writers that are listening, this guy will have some true information to drop on you in those videos.
Yeah, there's a lot of social media marketing tips. And it all, like I was kind of poking fun at myself earlier about the 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how to use Twitter thing. But in all seriousness, like I put it up, it's free. Every creative kind of person, anyone thinking about writing something next year, and you want to build your tribe, or you want to, like, whatever all these internet marketing people say, like, if you want to start building on your base and stuff, like, I show all that using Twitter. And I think the one that I kind of skipped out on was Facebook, because I'm kind of burnt out on Facebook. But, I talk about Pinterest, I talk about Instagram, I talk about hashtag management, all that kind of stuff. And I just put it up there for you guys for free. So, if you want to go check that out. And then I started the third season, but I kind of just run out of time to do them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's also there's like fun stuff. Like I do drink recipes, and I
pour water all over yourself.
I strung up a barbed wire baseball bat for a wrestler buddy of mine, and I just there's all kinds of goofy stuff on there too. But the process stuff is real good, and the social media marketing stuff is fantastic. And I point people to that all the time. Whenever I hear someone like, I can't figure Twitter out, I'm like, haha, you come to the right dude. Like,
well, where can folks get the book?
You can go to stigmatastudio.com, and it has a link to the Amazon there, or you can just search me out on Amazon. I got e-comic books up on Amazon for Kindle exclusively. I got my 2 graphic novels are up there. If you want some trade paperbacks of like the non-standard assembly books, there are 3 fantastic looking paperbacks. You could just go follow the link that's on my website. It's that comics link. You'll be able to find it all there.
Awesome. And of course, I'll have links over to your site and to all your stuff in the show notes for this episode too. So to make it real easy, people can just go right over to the episode show notes and pick that up.
Awesome.
But I really appreciate you letting us rerun your episode and get it out there to folks. I don't want to, it's not really in my heart, it's not a rerun. It's an encore, because I think it's something that the newer fans, we've grown our audience significantly in the last, several months. So it's something that I really wanted the newer fans to be able to listen to and to enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I really should be thanking you, for rerunning it. Cause it's hard. And it's hard to find kind of like evergreen content,
Right.
But I think that you found a great way to develop that with the library, the actual physical stories that are in the library.
Oh yeah, we get a lot of submissions now, which is really cool. It's just, there comes a time whenever you're like, hey, we need to take a little break here and work on a couple other things for a few weeks, or we're going to be buried, because then everything starts to suffer. So I thought the best thing to do is pick some of the really cool episodes from the past seasons. I picked some of my favorites and get them out there for folks to enjoy. But yeah, we definitely appreciate all the submissions that we get, because there's some really great stories that are coming in, and we're actually going to be running a long season, longer than any other Wicked Library season yet. I may cut this, but we're going to be doing episodes.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Dan, how long does it take for you to actually produce an episode? It's got to be like, I would say probably like 40 hours, right? I would say that's what it would be.
From scratch?
Reading, like from the minute you...
If I count everything, the number gets a lot higher. If I count like sitting down, reading the story, editing it, putting the music behind it, writing the show notes, posting it up to the website, getting the links and everything out, you're probably talking about a good 12 to 14 hours. If I count everything, including... reading it and, getting in touch with the authors and going through the slush pile. And, for a while there, we were doing 3 stories, from each author. So I would read all 3 stories, and now I'm down to 1 or at the top 2 stories from every author. And I've also cut the word count down because we're doing the interviews now. So, I try to keep the show under an hour, on the top end. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time that goes into it for sure, because I think that all the stories deserve that love.
Right. Yeah. I just think that I'm not that I'm worried or whatever, but like, it's hard, if people aren't podcasters or people aren't, performers or whatever, it might be difficult for them to realize how much time goes into that, and then you're also talking about the time that the writers are writing the stories. You're also talking about the time where the artists are doing the artwork for the stories,
right.
Like it's easy just to forget, because like on my podcast, it's just me and another idiot babbling, for an hour. Like I don't have to.
I've been on your show before. I've been that other idiot.
I don't have to, do prep. Like I don't have to reread the story and do a bunch of editing and stuff. So yeah, I think it's commendable, man. And you're doing such a great job with it. And, congratulations on all your success and getting game in. That was awesome.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think that the writers know, because what you see on the final page, that takes, maybe if you sit down and read it straight through 6 hours, 8 hours, it depends on how fast you read and how big the thing is. But if you sit down and you read a short story, like one of the ones that we feature on the show, you might read that in, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But that author spent probably, days, weeks even, writing and rewriting and redrafting and coming up with the story. So you don't see that. It's what happens behind the curtain. You're not supposed to. It's the magic that, that makes everything happen. But, there's definitely a lot that goes into it. And, I don't mind it, because I love story and storytelling, and I love the stories that we get in, and I love making them into something special for the writers, because they really deserve that. And, the artists too, they deserve to get that exposure and to get their work seen. And I hope that the listeners and, the folks that go to the website and look at the covers and everything, go back and visit those authors and go back and visit those artists and support them, because that's why we do this, is because we want people to see, appreciate, and enjoy what we make.
Right. So. Yeah. And you guys, you're just rocking and rolling, man. You're doing a fantastic job.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So John Towers, the podcast that John does is called Red Horse Radio. You can find all his stuff over at stigmatastudios.com, and you can also find links in the show notes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks for coming by, John, virtually.
Right. All right, Dan. Thanks a lot, man.
Hey, no problem. All works read in this audio recording and associated music and artwork are copyright of their respective creators and may not be used in any form without their permission. Dramatic reading performed by Nelson W. Pyles. Remember him? The voice of the librarian was performed by Nelson W. Pyles. The voice of Victoria Bigglesworth Hayes was performed by Amber Collins. The Wicked Library theme was written by Anthony Rousick and performed by Novus. All other music in this episode was performed by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com and used with his permission. The Wicked Library is a Ninth Story Studios production, ninthstory.com. Producer, Daniel Foytik. Program Director, Caitlin Marceau. Executive Producer and Creator, Nelson W. Pyles. Full show notes and links and artwork can be found at www.thewickedlibrary.com/BS5-1. Until next time, this has been Daniel Foytik. Go ahead, leave the lights on.
Just make sure the lamp you use doesn't contain an evil genie.
So as you might recall, I spent the beginning of this month bitching to you guys about my car problems and my headphone podcast equipment issues. And although I feel like that might have been a little distasteful, nothing has changed. I still need help. So if you can help me out there, please do.
Learn more at theabracast.com. Get graphic elements, notes, worksheets, and text versions of selected episodes, as well as access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing into the mailing list. Get all that, plus exclusive episodes, by supporting the show and becoming a subscriber at subscribestar.com.